all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book blends a classic with true crime. It's The Sinners All Bow, 2 authors, 1 murder, and the real Hester Prynne by Kate Winkler Dawson. I've spoken often about the timing of when I find books and when I then read the books that I have stacked in my nightstand. The Sinners All Bow popped out at me because of the Scarlet Letter connection. I teach at a juvenile detention center, and this year I've had some really long-term students, long enough that I finally get to teach American literature. We don't read the Scarlet Letter anymore. Even when I was in high school, we didn't read it, but rather just got a summary of the book. I didn't read the Scarlet Letter from cover to cover until I was a teacher. Even in college, we read a couple of excerpts, and that was it. I used to have a weekly book club at JDC, and one time we read the Scarlet Letter. Other than Wuthering Heights, the Scarlet Letter was the hardest book to understand, according to my students. And it is a tricky book, especially with that ridiculous first chapter that goes on forever. A chapter that Hawthorne misleads us thinking the Scarlet Letter is a true story. But The Sinners All Bow makes it sound like there is a true story in there. But anyway, the way I integrate the Scarlet Letter into my American Lit classes show the Mama's Family episode when she goes back to night school because she never graduated because of the Scarlet Letter. Mama's Family was this adorable show in the 80s. Here's a clip of the episode.
Just what about that letter? How come Hester was the only one who had to wear that A? Takes 2 to tango, you know. I think Reverend Dimsdale was a spineless jellyfish not to admit that hyperactive little Pearl was his.
What I love about the episode is that it shows the power of reading and how we can have such a passionate response to a book, no matter how old the book is, but we have to actually read the book, not the Cliff Notes version. It's this passion for reading that I hope my students will gain from my little The Scarlet Letter lesson. And I thought The Sinners All Bow would give me a little something extra to add to it, that Hawthorne was inspired by a true story after all. Well, I wasn't all that passionate about Dawson's book. I really wanted to like it, but I just didn't care for her writing style. So here's The Sinners All Bow in a nutshell. In 1832, Sarah Maria Cornell was found hanging at a farm in Rhode Island. She was pregnant at the time of her death. A minister, Ephraim Avery, who was a married man, was accused of Sarah's murder, yet due to victim shaming, a jury found Avery not guilty. Catherine Williams, a successful writer at the time, wrote Fall River, an authentic narrative shortly after the murder. Williams' Fall River book is considered one of America's first true crime books. She surprisingly advocates for the victim, which is a rarity back then and even now. But Williams herself was biased. She despised the Methodist movement, and later Dawson realizes that Williams was paid to write the story the way she did. Her bias is obvious against Avery, and she deliberately leaves out key information when it doesn't fit the narrative she wants to project. So Dawson comes in with her own research, as well as comparing Sarah to the Scarlet Letter's protagonist, Hester Prynne, and Hawthorne's own experience with the murder of Sarah Cornell. It sounds cool in theory, but it fell short, mostly due to the way Dawson writes and how she puts it all together. I enjoy Casey Sherman's style of writing. Helltown unfolded like a story, even if Sherman took a few fictional liberties. I'm okay with that because I knew it going into the book. Dawson, on the other hand, writes with the voice of a boring speaker. And I'm not trying to be mean when I say that, but that's the tone of the book. She breaks into the story several times to discuss stuff that she actually later writes, oh, well, I'll discuss this later, or I discussed it before, or remind us of something we read just 3 pages ago, or gives us lengthy definitions and mini histories on fingerprinting and DNA and whatnot. If that isn't bad enough, she repeats this boring information several times. This sort of writing just kept pulling me out of the story. It was a little obnoxious and aggravating, especially when some of the passages are these descriptive lyrical paragraphs that place us at the scene of the crime, and then bam, Dawson yanks us out again with some jargon about forensics or a history lesson on how poorly women were treated. And it's too bad, because this book held much potential, especially when we talk about victim shaming. But Dawson also gives us the little things, the stuff that can come back to haunt us, especially if we are the victim of a crime. So here's an excerpt that details Sarah's shoplifting, which she did more than once. And Dawson is kind of reflecting on how this all comes together when you have a crime. As I began researching this book, it dawned on me that these characters lived lives filled with tiny, seemingly innocent mistakes, like all of us do. But a misstep that would be insignificant today, say a yearning for a beautiful, expensive dress and the steps one might take to procure it, could prove calamitous to centuries ago, even fatal. Sarah Cornell was tempted by a pretty dress and vowed she'd do whatever it took to have it. This is so crucial when we're dealing with true crime. We have to decide what meaning such events have on those who are murdered, and we might be placing less or more significance on things than we should. We always use any indiscretion against the one who can no longer speak for themselves, especially in the historical context. While Dawson brings up victim shaming, she doesn't always stay there long enough to adequately develop this, only bringing it up several times, revealing a new piece here and there about it, which was a problem throughout the book. The organization was all over the place, which led to much repetition. Avery is found not guilty in part to a lack of evidence, but the jury was also swayed by the smear campaign the defense did against Sarah. And what was even more interesting, women were the ones who spoke the worst about Sarah. So let me read you this, which occurs way at the end of the book during the trial. And it's way at the end of the book. Another woman testified that Sarah admitted she could imitate most anyone's handwriting, including Avery's, thus the anonymous notes might have been written in her own hand. Others said that Ephraim Avery was virtually never alone at the Thompson camp meeting when the sexual assault supposedly took place. Each woman who took the stand turned on Sarah Cornell, depicting her as a criminal, a fornicator, and an unstable harlot who often threatened to take her own life while framing the minister who had expelled her from her beloved Methodist church. They detailed why Ephraim Avery could never be a killer or a rapist. His character was beyond reproach. Boy, some things never change. Dawson attempts to weave these elements into her comparison of the Scarlet Letter that Hester Prynne was the character Nathaniel Hawthorne created from his exposure to the case. The trial of Avery sounded like it held the town's attention like the O.J. Simpson trial, a minister on trial for the murder of his pregnant mistress. Hawthorne visits a wax display 6 years after the murder of Sarah, and what exhibit is of Avery and Sarah. Hawthorne writes about this in his journal. Like Sarah, Hester is an expert seamstress. Dawson throws in some random Scarlet Letter quotes throughout the book to show such parallels in the way Sarah was treated and how Sarah behaved, much like Hester Prynne. But these are just random quotes. If you're looking for a more in-depth look at the Scarlet Letter through the murder of Sarah Cornell, it's not in here. It's a shoddy comparison at best. Dawson doesn't even write of the tedious first chapter of the Scarlet Letter where the narrator leads us to believe this is a true story. That probably would have drawn more parallels than anything, but maybe even Dawson couldn't get through that first chapter of the Scarlet Letter. The Sinners All Bow was a neat idea, but for me it didn't come together. The narrative is incredibly broken throughout. Dawson even squeezes in the Lizzie Borden murders. It is Fall River after all, but it's irrelevant. The best thing in the book is how Dawson writes about Catherine Williams' refusal to blame the victim, but that led Williams to eliminate any tawdry information about Sarah. It's a conundrum, one that is unique to crime writing, yet Dawson didn't quite fulfill what her book jacket sets out to do. The story was captivating, but Dawson's writing of the story wasn't always that captivating. If you are a true crime writer, The Sinners All Bow would be a good one to read just because of the topics Dawson addresses. If you love the Scarlet Letter, sure, read The Sinners All Bow, just lower your expectations, like a lot. Out of 289 pages, you're going to read less than 5 pages about the Scarlet Letter, and what you do read will not lead you to too many new insights. But maybe Dawson does bring forth an inherent truth in The Sinners All Bow. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote, "If the truth were to be known, everyone would be wearing a Scarlet Letter in one form or another." Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter one book at a time.